A new moral panic and wave of media propaganda is here, and Americans across the political spectrum are falling for it. Hey guys, welcome back to the show, your home for independent and nonpartisan commentary and analysis on politics, media, internet, culture, and more. We're going to break down some fascinating, you have to say, polling about AI data centers, which are warehouses that house computers that power AI and various forms of internet technology and have actually been in place across the country for decades, but obviously are seeing a big increase in construction and investment as AI grows and the necessary infrastructure for it, the demands for that grow as well. Well, Americans across the political spectrum have turned completely against AI data center construction in a remarkably short period of time. So much so that now you actually have Americans more supportive of building a coal power plant near where they live than an AI data center. We're going to go through this shocking polling in this episode because there are some misconceptions here that I fear a lot of people are falling for. This is from Heat Map, exclusive. 75% of Americans now oppose local data center development. The U.S. public support for AI data centers has continued to collapse since the spring, a new Heat Map Pro poll shows. Now, they report that the American public has soured even further on local data center development since the spring. 3/4 of Americans now say they would oppose a new data center being built where they live. That's by far the most negative response since Heat Map Pro started polling Americans about their receptivity to data centers roughly a year ago. And now they have this chart here that shows you how from August of 2025 to February of 2026 to May 2026 to August of 2026, they asked the same poll questions and the support just keeps plummeting and plummeting and plummeting. And this is actually a bipartisan phenomenon. This is not, some just progressive socialist thing. You have Republicans and conservatives and independents and moderates all really starting to oppose the construction of AI data centers. And I suspect that's because there's been a lot of media panic and misinformation about them. And then social media is just littered with absurd stories and false claims about data centers. And then the positive side of them just goes completely ignored or overlooked. But we are going to get into it all. First, here's some more data. Across parties, data center support keeps falling. And then it shows Republicans, independents, and Democrats, it's plummeting among all of them. Though most among Democrats, and least among Republicans, those are still some pretty strong collapses in support regardless. And what's so fascinating about this is that just over the period of about 1 year, support has cratered, it has plummeted, it has massively changed. And normally you don't see public opinion on an issue like this change so quickly. They explain for Heat Map, what's most remarkable is the pace of change. We've polled this same question 4 times in the past 12 months and haven't changed its wording once. Yet Americans have swung a remarkable 33 points against data centers in the intervening time. It's a faster and deeper shift in American public opinion than I would have once thought possible on any issue. We first asked the question late last August. Back then, Americans were about evenly split on whether they would support or oppose a data center being built near their home, with roughly 43% in support and 42% opposed. And now we've got, 75% of Americans opposed? You don't really see shifts that large and that quick in public opinion almost ever, genuinely. Even on issues where public opinion changed rather rapidly, like gay marriage is a good example. It's not that rapid, and it's not that extreme in a 1-year time period. This is almost unprecedented. And it comes, even though I think most Americans don't actually know what an AI data center is. It is just a warehouse full of computers, and have a bunch of concerns about them that have essentially no basis in reality. And we're going to get into all of that. But I think this is actually incredible. So they have another graph here where they ask about the other types of energy infrastructure that how do you feel about them being built near where you live? And even things like coal power plants, which are obviously pollute much more in the local area than a data center, which doesn't necessarily pollute at all, which we'll go through, even a coal power plant now has more being built in your neighborhood has more public support than an AI data center. That is astonishing. Anyway, reading from Heat Map here. It's worth stepping back and thinking of how remarkable this is. The American public, according to Heatmap's polling, is more skeptical of data centers, which once built are essentially warehouses, than they are of gas-fired power plants, which emit, besides the greenhouse gases, nitrogen oxide and sulfur dioxide. They oppose data centers more than they do wind farms, with their towering turbines and mechanical hums, more than battery storage facilities, which can erupt into super hot fires, or even nuclear power plants, long the go-to reference for scary energy facility. Yeah, that last one is a good point, that I actually think nuclear power is safe, and it is objectively, but people are very scared by the prospect because, of course, the prospect of a nuclear meltdown is, while it's super unlikely, very terrifying. Yet people think AI data centers, they're less likely to support one of those being built in their neighborhood than a nuclear power plant. I'm sorry, but we've lost the plot. Like, that's insane. That's actually crazy. Now, anyway, why? Why are people so against AI data centers? Well, they polled on this and they asked, what are your primary concerns? And so I'll flash this graph on screen. Water usage, electricity usage, environmental impacts, land use, local infrastructure strains. Every single one of these concerns is in some cases fake and non-existent in actuality, and in other cases can be mitigated and can be regulated and done in an appropriate way. Obviously, there are things about data centers that should be kept in check through regulations, and that's why you have a process where permits have to be approved and local governments get input, because there are some things that come with any industrial project of that scale that can adversely affect an environment or an ecosystem. But for example, water concerns isn't a thing. First, how much water they use. Data centers use a tiny fraction of the amount of water than golf courses. And yet never anywhere in the country have people panicked about golf courses being built, right? It is something that is manufactured by panic and by misleading media claims or media stories, because they can put a story that is factually true and just has a bunch of big numbers about how much water is used by a new data center, but you have no context for the scale of that and how it's actually less than your average golf course. So it is not actually that meaningful. And then people need to understand how data centers use the water. They think that like somehow they pollute your local drinking water or something, when in reality, they use the water to cool the heat generated by the computers and machines, and then the water evaporates into the atmosphere. So they don't even use drinkable water in many cases. They often now are providing their own water supplies and or getting it separate from the local supply. But regardless, people have this concern that like the data center is going to contaminate their local water supply or their drinking water or something that doesn't even make sense. That's not how they use water. And there's nothing contaminating it. It's being used to cool things, to cool heat that's generated by computers. That's why they use a lot of water. I think the most intuitive of these concerns is the concern about electricity usage, because obviously if you build a new warehouse that's using a ton of power and just put it on the existing system, a massive increase in demand could lead to increased prices. However, in reality, data center construction and expansion does not lead to increased energy prices, because in order to meet the constant supply and the regular demand, they have to actually invest in infrastructure upgrades. So there's research on this, right? Here, a study titled Have Data Centers Raised Your Electric Bill? Causal Evidence from the United States. They estimate that data centers caused average retail electricity rates to fall modestly in the United States from 2015 to 2024 because essentially what they call economies of scale for transmission, distribution, and generation costs allow them to actually, on net, not increase the energy prices, because the infrastructure itself has to be upgraded to accommodate the large increase in demand. And then they provide an extremely reliable customer and level of static demand to the power companies, which are not just a pure market, in which case, they would just jack up prices. They're regulated utilities, so they don't lead to this significant increase in electricity prices. This is a concern that is not really borne out. But even in the cases where maybe it is true in a particular area, they see a small increase, you have to weigh that against the exponential increase in tax revenue that they bring to these locations that then can be used to fund the local government, massively upgrade all the infrastructure, or even cut the taxes elsewhere. So even if there was a small power increase, that wouldn't be a reason to just stop data center construction. You could simply use some of the tax revenue they generate to have some sort of abatement or subsidy or program to offset that cost for people. So even then, it's probably the most reasonable of the concerns, but it's overblown and certainly not a reason to just do what a lot of these opponents want to do, which is just put a moratorium, just a halt on constructing of data centers, which will really just lead to them being built elsewhere. And the places that embrace them will succeed. So here's one story from CNN. Quincy, Washington shows what a good data center deal looks like. About 30 facilities shoulder an estimated 57% of local property taxes, funding a $120 million high school, library, hospital, and police and fire stations. That sounds like a pretty good deal to me, actually. If I was the mayor of a small city or town, I would be rolling out the red carpet for a local data center to set up operations and making sure that obviously things aren't going to be polluting or harming the way that the environment locally, the way that any large construction project can. But beyond that, yeah, welcome it in. It's a huge generator of tax revenue. And as long as it's done properly, it doesn't need to inconvenience anyone at all. It's interesting that Loudoun County in Virginia, which is one of the wealthiest zip codes in America, has had data centers for years and has massively profited and benefited from them. And these extremely affluent people don't mind having it in their backyard. And if it was really such a big problem, they would. Here's a New York Times story about Loudoun County. A county got rich from data centers. Some question, at what cost? Loudoun County, Virginia hosts more than 250 data centers that bring in huge tax revenues, but some officials and residents worry the county has become too dependent on that cash. This is a comical framing of the amazing success story of Loudoun County's embrace of data centers as well, they just got too flush with local tax revenue. It's oh no, now they're overly dependent on this. It's just a hilarious framing of what first world problems, right? Like a great problem to have. Anyway, from the story here, over the past 2 years, Virginia's Loudoun County unveiled a sleek $102 million recreation center with multiple pools and hydro massage chairs. It spent $22 million to convert the estate of former President James Monroe into a park, and it opened 2 new schools with another under construction. While many communities are in fiscal crisis, Loudoun is flush. The source of its riches? Data centers. A convergence of early fiber internet access and fast-track zoning has made Loudoun the data center hub of the world. Amazon, Microsoft, Google, and others have built or are leasing more than 250 warehouses full of computer servers that are powering AI and the internet. At least 24 more are in the pipeline. 2 decades into its experiment, Loudoun has become a case study for the rest of the nation on how to make data centers pay off. Thanks to the proliferation of the warehouses, the quiet bedroom community, 30 minutes outside of D.C., has transformed into a tech destination with trophy schools and libraries and freshly tarred roads. There you have it, folks. The horrific impact of data centers that Americans are so concerned about. This is why it's listen, people are why do you care about this? Why are you so passionate about this issue? It's not because I have any particular vested interest in AI data centers. I am not, in fact, significantly invested in them or have any connection to them whatsoever, but it's because it's a microcosm of the kind of populist, or I like to call it slopulist, thinking and approach to public policy that is infecting the American public and threatens to set us back for decades, where scary sounding things and scare stories and claims circulate like wildfire on social media and in media, and people just feel a certain way about something and then swing against it en masse without doing proper research or really looking into the facts of a situation at all. And as a result, if and when that becomes implemented in policy, people feel better, but actually it's a massive own goal that objectively just hurts everyone involved at the actual economic and policy level. So that's why this issue fires me up, because it's perhaps the most glaring example in recent political history of Americans broadly just falling for absolute misinformation and propaganda that directly, and there are some who suggest that some of it's foreign fueled, right? Because they don't want America to be on the cutting edge of technology and AI data centers and everything else. But even if it's not, even if it's all just organic, well, it is the perfect example of Americans falling for the propaganda. Hook, line, and sinker to our own detriment. And it's really, really disturbing and disappointing to me to see how widespread false and factually bankrupt notions and perceptions can spread and can be just perpetuated, and how it takes so long and really doesn't seem to even be happening for truth to catch up with the fiction. That's why I'm so concerned about it. But that's just my take. You guys will have to let me know what you think in the comments below. Make sure you subscribe to the channel if you aren't yet, and if you support my independent-minded approach to politics and policy. And we will be back with more real soon.